I was in my mid-20s when I just hit this wall in my life, and I just felt really lost and stuck, and I wasn't really sure on what it meant to even be a man. And then I picked up this book, and what I found in the pages of this book just like really shook me to my core. You know, it wasn't like I was reading a book. It was a mirror that was just reflecting back to me some of the challenges that I was facing in my life and what it meant to be a man. And so many men can feel a bit lost and a bit disconnected, and they're not sure about their identity and their purpose in life. And what I found in here is 5 challenges that defines a man's life, and it just gave me clarity on the way forward. And I'm just going to walk you through. I'm going to give you some quotes about the 5 challenges that define a man's life. Hey, welcome to A Little Nudge. My name is Derek, and for the last 3 decades I've been helping people explore and deepen faith and relate their faith to their ordinary everyday lives. And in these videos I'm just giving you tools, I'm giving you little nudges that'll help you live a deeper and a more meaningful life. So each month what I'm planning to do is share a book that has changed my life. So last month we looked at Thomas Kelly's Testament of Devotion, and you can check that on my channel. And today we're looking at this book called Adam's Return by Richard Rohr. Now, it's got an awful title and it's got an awful cover, but I promise you it's one of the most impactful books that I've read. And essentially what Richard Rohr is, a Catholic priest, and essentially what he does in this book is he looks at traditional cultures and how they tend to have initiation ceremonies for boys to become men. And so he looks at all these different initiation ceremonies that happen, and he tries to kind of, although they're very different, he tries to pull out actually why do cultures have them? Why is there a transition for a person to go from a boy to a man? And why are they have to do various things? Maybe they have to go in the wilderness, they have to survive on their own or complete a task or something like that. There'll always be something they have to do supported by a company of elders, or there'll be set a challenge within the company of elders. And for those who live in the West, certainly I'm in the West, I live in the UK, but actually what he does is he pulls out what he thinks are the key lessons that these processes are supposed to teach. And he reckons that they're part of creation, that the way that we're made, and that part of our growth and development. And I've just found in these challenges just really, really helpful. So I'm just going to walk through the 5 challenges and offer quotes from Rohr's book, and just to help you think about your own kind of journey or the people that you might know. And the lesson 1 that he pulls out from these ceremonies is this one, that life is hard. I can remember when I was kind of in my late teens, maybe about 19, 20, and the church I was part of, we had this pastor person who was looking after young adults in the church and in other churches of that region. And he was really, really helpful for those of us who were wrestling with all sorts of issues at university around relationships and decisions. And I was going through a particular tough time with a relationship, and I remember bouncing a lot of ideas, and he's always there to kind of share. And eventually that issue resolved itself. And then another issue came up within university life. And I remember seeing him one day, and I remember seeing him on the corridor, and he was like, "Oh, how's it going? How's Derek? How's it going?" And I'd been talking about a particular issue for months that had been resolved. And I remember saying to him, "Oh, you never guess what happened now." And I said, "I've got a problem with this now." And I was expecting this warm, lovely pastoral response. And he turned to me and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Well, Derek, welcome to adulthood." And he just kind of wandered on, and I was expecting this kind of support, and he would indulge me with my issues, but he was kind of just saying, yeah, life is hard. Actually, life is a series of challenges. Okay, so here we have the first lesson, life is hard. And this is how Rohr begins this section. Here we go. All great spirituality is about what we do with our pain. So the first lesson of initiation was to teach the young man not to run from pain, and in fact not to get rid of any pain. Wow, that is challenging in the culture I'm part of. Not to run from pain or not to get rid of any pain. There's so much of medicating that we want to do, and we numb ourselves, all sorts of stuff. But not to get rid of it until he had first learnt its lessons. Human life could not risk being mere self-legitimation and pleasure-seeking. A man could not risk always taking the easier way. A man could not risk always taking the easier way. And most of the Bible is written to people who are suffering, who have been persecuted, who are struggling, particularly in the New Testament where it talks about the church coming after Jesus being resurrected, and they're facing the pressure of the Roman emperor and persecution, and suffering's talked about a lot. But interestingly, it's never like the comfortable, softy type of advice. That the advice is often about this issue of what are you going to do with your pain? You know, are you going to deny it, or are you going to transform it? Are you going to transmit it to others, or actually you're going to take it and respond to it? You're going to use it to develop your character. You're going to use it to learn more about God. Are you going to use your trials to become stronger? And that is always the direction that the Bible pushes people. You find that like in James and some of Paul's letters. It's this constant message, which is very different from certainly the culture that I'm in the minute, which is more about kind of cuddling and being supportive and pastoral with people rather than challenging. And let me just read this little section from Raw. And so if Raw has this really interesting list of what happens if we don't transform our pain, that, some of these things might happen. And he's got 5 things that might happen. We will become inflexible and blaming and petty as we grow older. We will need other people to hate in order to expel our inner negative energy. We will play the victim in some form as a means of false power. Now, I know it's easy to label all these other people, but we might want to think about ourselves and whether there's any of this pattern in ourselves. We will spend much of our life seeking security and status as a cover-up for a lack of substantial sense of self. Oh, this is a hard one. We will pass on our deadness to our family and our children and our friends, that we don't transform our pain. If we deny it, we will end up transmitting it to other people, and a lot of those things might happen to us. And I guess the ultimate example of this is Jesus and what he does with his pain. You know, so Jesus dies on the cross, this horrific death and all the kind of spiritual responsibility that gets put on him, the sins of the world. And he's on the cross and dying. And he says, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. That he, rather than blaming people, he absorbs the pain into himself and he offers forgiveness, that he experiences that pain, but through his pain that he gets it transformed so he can bless others and rescue others. And that's almost the model for us, that we make the world a better place, not by experiencing pain and spewing it out to other people, but that we transform it, we absorb it into ourselves, and we get transformed into more mature people so we can be rocks for our community, our family, or whatever it might be. Life is hard, message number 1. The second one, which is really challenging, is you're not that important. So some of our culture, certainly the culture I'm part of, there's a lot of stuff about building up people's self-esteem by saying they're so important, you're so special, you're so talented, there's so much you can do in the world, you're so lovely, you're so beautiful, you're so everything, that it encourages people to think that they're really, really important, that they're the center of the universe. Yet what you find from Jesus is an emphasis that you're not actually that important, that he praises humility and are willing to put others first, are willing to kind of serve others. Let's check another quote from Rob. Every master's lesson, every parable or spiritual riddle. So Raw's talking about spiritually mature people who might teach us, people like Jesus and other of the early church leaders, people who might be inspired by. He says every one of their lessons, every confounding question is intended to bring up the limitations, that's a key word, limitations of our wisdom and our power and our tiny self. Compare that, if you will, to the Western education approach of parroting answers, passing tests, getting grades, which make us think we do know what is important, and therefore we are important. Information is seen as a power, as opposed to the beginner's mind, which wisdom deems absolutely necessary for enlightenment. Wisdom seems absolutely necessary, this kind of beginner's mind and the limitations of our power and knowledge. Well, that's really challenging, isn't it, to look at our limitations and put us in kind of right perspective rather than kind of puffing ourselves up in how central and important that we are. And then the third challenge that defines a man's life, according to Raw, is this one, that your life is not about you, that your life is not about you. which is a natural reaction that we all had. You know what I mean? If you're ever looking at a photo, if you're in a group and they take a photo and then someone's showing everyone the photo, your first response is to look at yourself and think about, how do I look? How have I come across? Is my eyes open? Do I look fat, thin, old, wrinkled, or whatever it might be? Because we see ourselves as the center of the universe. Our emotions are the center of any story. And yet, through what Raw is saying and the teachings of Jesus, we get this message that your life is not about you, which is just a staggering revolution to turn things upside down. And then Raw quotes one of the early church leaders, Paul, who kind of achieves this level of maturity where he says this phrase. He said, "I no longer live, nor I." In Galatians 2:19, he cries out, "It's no longer I that live." And this one-man show turned a Jewish sect into a worldwide movement. He allowed his small life to be used by the great life, and that is finally all that matters. Your life is not about you, it's about God, and it's about allowing your life to be done unto you. Wow, that's challenging, isn't it? Wow, that's really challenging, isn't it? And we get this kind of great idea from Jesus that the way we discover life is to give it away, whereas when we try to hold on to life and make it about us, actually we lose life itself. The fourth challenge that we have that defines a man's life is this one, that you are not in control, that you are not in control. I mean, one of the exciting things when you move from a boy to a man or into adulthood is that ability to control things, that you start to become a master of your destiny, you start to control your money and your time, and you make decisions about job and relationships, and it's almost you throw off the shackles of your family and maybe your parents' influence, and you have that freedom, and that can be quite intoxicating for a while. But then we hit this wall where we discover actually we're not in control. There's a lot of self-help teaching which emphasizes your control of your life, take control of your life, be responsible, and there's kind of some good nuggets in that. But as an absolute foundation from life, it's an illusion, it's a lie that you're not in control. And one of the key lessons, one of the key challenges we need to face is that idea that actually we're not steering the ship, that there's a bigger force at work in the world. I would believe that's God, and God's working out his purposes, that he's in control rather than us. But that can be a real challenge to face that. We can see such rites, so he's talking about the initiation process for boys into men. They universally try to prepare a young man for what I call the great defeat, the necessary recognition that you are not really running the show, and any attempt to run it will ruin it. Any attempt to run it will ruin it. It's not just that you're not in control, but by trying to be in control, you actually destroy the world and those people around you. We saw so many men doing that to families and companies and nations really as well, that you're not running the show. The intense self-will of the autonomous ego must be eventually disillusioned with itself. Right, that's very fancy language, isn't it? It's meaning that idea that you just let it go and accept your limitations of not being in control. Having total control and even the value of being in control is a major desire, an illusion in the early years of life. Yet many hold on to it until their last breath. Try practicing release control earlier. It'll make your second half of life much happier and much easier, he goes on to say. And this idea of trying to just let go and release control is a major part of maturing and becoming who God's called you to be. Another one of the big areas that this was a challenge to me was becoming a parent and having kids, and then trying to influence their life, but then realizing actually I didn't just want to influence it, I wanted to control it, that if they did exactly what I want them to do all the time, then all was it well, and trying to have kind of mastery over that, and being willing to let that go and let them be little humans that make their own choice. And that has been quite a journey for me personally. And I remember reading Arthur Brooks's book, From Strength to Strength, which is a bit about midlife crisis or about how do you live the second half of life well. And he talks about how he is embracing this idea of a reverse bucket list, that he used to have a bucket list of all the great things he wanted to do, and he would check it off every year, parachute jump, whatever, going to Everest, or all the crazy things that people have. And he realised that as he was ticking them off, it wasn't making him more fulfilled, it was making him more empty. And then he developed this idea of the reverse bucket list, that he thought freedom and life is experienced not from doing loads of stuff, but letting go of our attachment. So he has this reverse bucket list of things that he's trying to get rid of, things he's kind of letting go of. And so for that, he might look at his list of things that he's attached to and think, you know what, this year I want to let go of caring what people think about me, or trying to win every argument, or trying to have a nice car, or putting my trust in financial security, or trying to worry about my future or my health, or whatever it might be. He would be trying to let them go. And the idea that he's getting less and less and less that he's attached to, that is controlling his life. And I just found that idea quite challenging, to be honest, although slightly inspirational as well. And then we get to the last one, number 5 of the challenges that define a man's life, which is this one. And if you thought it's been challenging so far, then this one probably tops them all, which is this one, that you are going to die, that you are going to die. And it's a surprise of surprises, really, isn't it? Because the truth is everyone's going to die, and we know everybody is going to die, and actually everyone who's ever lived has died, and everyone who has lived, well, it's just an inevitable of everybody. Everybody knows that. There's no secret, no surprise, and yet we act like it's a surprise. So if you've ever known anyone who's had a near-death experience, or if you've ever had a cancer diagnosis or a brush with death health-wise, and you have like this wake-up call of your own mortality, that it can shake you to the core and lead you to living a different life. Or if somebody's got this terminal diagnosis, they've got 6 months left, they tend to change how they're living. It tends to wake them up that in the face of death, which people are denying, it changes how people live, which is kind of odd, really. I mean, I totally get it, but it's odd also, given that actually we knew we were going to die. We knew that this wasn't endless. I mean, I believe with God and the resurrection that we do live eternally with God, but in terms of our existence here, we know that that is going to come. Yet when we face it, it kind of shakes us up a little bit. And in this quote, we have Raw just talking about how humans try and deny death and live eternally. This is what he says. He tries to overcome death by being famous, strong, significant, remembered, smart, and super religious. Every young man wants to somehow be a hero. You cannot take it away from him. As Ernest Becker brilliantly taught, all of men's heroic dramas are his attempt to stare down and overcome death. And that's from The Denial of Death. The heroic instincts in males, according to Becker, is man's attempt to live forever. It's a source of his greatest creativity and courage, and God surely uses it, but it is also a lie that man gives man vitality and direction, but only for a while. Eventually his heroics will and must fail him. And it's that idea that eventually he needs to let go and accept that he won't live forever. And so one of the challenges we face is to come to that point where we can say, I'm going to die, and that's okay, that I'm ready to face it. And that's one of the things as we get older that we need to face. Anyway, they're the 5 challenges that define a man's life, and I'm still working through them all, to be honest, even though I read this book decades and decades ago. And if you want to know another book that's changed my life, then check out this one. This is a book that I picked up 29 years ago about living a simple life and a busy life, and it's still changing my life today. And I share some quotes and some of the key ideas in that video, so check that one out. And hope you've enjoyed watching this, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.